Betsy DeVos has been sworn in as the nation's new education secretary, probably the most uneducated education secretary we've ever had, following efforts by Democrats to derail her confirmation. All 48 members of the Senate Democratic Caucus, along with 2 Republicans, voted against her. But Vice President Mike Pence came in and cast the tie-breaking vote. DeVos is a big supporter of school vouchers and charter schools. The Vice President votes in the affirmative and the nomination is... So, look, this woman apparently bought her way into a nomination by all accounts. She didn't just support this new president, can I use air quotes, president, but also hundreds of thousands of dollars spent on the elections of people who voted for her nomination.
Yes.
I'm not saying this has never happened before, but when you have somebody who is as unqualified for the job as she is, it's incredible. Where do we go from here? Because to me, what I keep thinking about when I think about stuff like this is voting matters.
Certainly. And this is sort of feels like, in many ways, an almost legal case study in corruption, right? I mean, I think that it is, I won't say it's unprecedented, because unfortunately, with the passing of Citizens United, there has been a sort of influx of money that influences the sort of legislative decisions that are made, both in sort of congressional, Senate, and in the executive branch. But I taught high school English for several years in Prince George's County, right up the road. And to put someone who is so fundamentally incompetent, who is so fundamentally incapable of understanding the most basic precedents of federal education law in charge of the money that many of these states need, and that is necessary for them to put forth the programs that are responsible for this sort of upward academic and social mobility of our students, is deeply frightening. And I think that, you know, clearly the Republicans have prioritized party over public education, and I've put somebody in place who is a sort of advocate of a free market notion of what education should look like. But the problem with the free market is that in a free market there are winners and losers. And public education is a system in which we shouldn't have certain children winning and certain children losing. But that is the priority that the administration has apparently made.
Well, look, but Dr. Gregg, when she was being confirmed, she didn't know what the IDEA was.
No.
I mean, for me, as a person with a child who takes advantage of special education in the schools, and somebody who's had to go through years and years of IEPs, she was being asked these questions, and she's saying, well, it would be up to the parents to ensure that their children go to a school that offers, and she literally was in the twilight zone. You know, I'm not always on board with you when we start talking about white privilege and people with money and et cetera, because I don't think they're all the same. But was this not the prime example?
Well, no, not the same, as many poor whites are going to find out in the next 4 years. But as you've explained before, she doesn't even know the difference between federal and state law. But let's not lose focus. The Department of Education only controls about 10% of education budgets around the country. Most education budgets are state and local. The Department of Education is a cabinet position that's low-hanging fruit, and these people don't care. When we got to look at Steve Bannon and these cats in the White House, they're after bigger fish. Donald Trump is basically paying off, as you said, this is a patronage job, not an ambassadorship, but a cabinet. The Republicans voted lockstep with a little political theater at the end because they don't care about that. Now, when it comes to the fact that in Michigan, when she was funding using her daddy's Amway money and her brother who started Blackwater, the private security group, when they're funneling money for charter schools in Detroit, they didn't deal in the charters that she was funding with special ed. They said, well, send those kids over to the public schools. She doesn't care. She doesn't know. She doesn't care. They don't care in the government, and we've got to care about our own kids when we realize that education really should be a state and local issue, and we got to stop her from putting her fingers in education the best we can.
Congressman Scott, we got to pull on you while you're here. Look, voting matters, and this is a consequence of election. We're looking at some dire consequences, perhaps the likes of which we haven't seen before. What can constituents do at this point when we're looking at someone like DeVos, who really seems to be interested in divesting public school education?
I think if you look at her background and look at the hearings, that she did not show a lot of support for public schools, and so we have to put up the fight for public schools. It's going to be an interesting fight because just yesterday, Republicans introduced a bill to abolish the Department of Education. Now, you're right, it's only 10% of the money, but with that money comes a commitment to civil rights, starting with the Brown decision, making sure that low-income students have a fair shot. We put the money where it's needed. IDEA, the people who are usually falling through the cracks, disabled, minorities, achievement gaps, that's where the money, that's what the money is for. And it's in the public schools. You talk about school choice. School choice has never been shown to increase education. The choice schools, so you take a voucher, go somewhere, the students do, on average, they do average. All you've done is taken money from the public schools. You could have used that money for something that worked. Smaller class sizes, better teacher professional development, early childhood education, after-school programs, reading recovery, things you know actually work. And you use that money to pay for students, most of whom would have been in private school anyway. So you haven't done anything for the public schools, and that's where the fight's going to be. Yesterday, last year, about a year ago, we passed the Every Student Succeeds Act. We made sure that the states had the responsibility of ascertaining achievement gaps and then curing the achievement gaps. Just this week, they've set aside many of the regulations that put that in effect, and so we've got to start from scratch, making that fight all over again. Achievement gaps, making sure everybody has a fair shot in the public education. And if you spend all your time on choice, we just have to put up the fight. We're not going to let them dismantle public education.
And states and municipalities are going to have to do their job.
Kickstart your day at 7 and get the news you need from the perspective you want. NewsOne Now with Roland Martin, every weekday morning at 7 on TV1.